Alright, today's vlog is about goals in the future with a sort of two questions from German Herman123 on kind of the same topic. So the first bit is, how about setting the focus on the future? In an ideal world, what would you do? How would you feel? How would it look if you had reached all your goals? And then the second one, sort of like the second part, I guess, don't limit it to goals. You talk a lot about the past and about problems. Thing is, how do you imagine having resolved all that? What would you feel like? How would life be? I'm going to be super upfront and say I find this question really annoying and doesn't really understand where I'm at in life. And you know, like, this is a very common thing that psychologists and also my GP have taken me through plenty of times. You know, the whole goal setting thing. I don't know if that's part of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or if it's just a more general psychological thing. But for people with standard depression, as in not complicated by being different or something like schizoid, you know, that helps a lot of people. Just setting goals, shifting their focus to like what they want to do, it helps a lot of people. Does not help me, and I'm going to go through some of why, but I'm going to use the question to sort of break it down and, you know, we'll get through things. But so setting the focus on the future, like, one thing about the future, right? People who have anxiety, I think a little too much about the future. You know, if you think about the craze for mindfulness kind of stuff, that's about the present. So thinking about the future isn't necessarily better than thinking about the past, at least from that sort of standard theory. Thinking about the future can, have a lot of anxieties because people wonder how are they going to get to the next day and things that are going to happen, and they stress about it. And so, it's not necessarily a positive thing or a positive exercise. But so in an ideal world, what would you do? In an ideal world, ideal means completely unrealistic. And like, what's the point of trying to think about an ideal world when the world is not going to be like that? And I know the argument would be, well, thinking about an ideal world can help you figure out your goals and, you know, what you want to do. I get that argument, but it's not been my experience. Like, in an ideal world, like there's so many different forms an ideal world could take that the world is just never going to be. So for example, if we take really obvious easy ones, in an ideal world, no one would have to struggle for survival. No one would be hungry. Everyone would be able to make enough money. Everyone would be fulfilled. You wouldn't have poverty in significant portions of the globe. You wouldn't have countries like China and Russia doing what they do. Places like America that seem fine wouldn't have the problems that they do. Like, there's so many of those kinds of things. But also, in an ideal world, I should be able to fly under my own power. I should be able to turn into a dragon or something, and, you know, that kind of, like, there's unrealistic in the real world, and then there's super unrealistic imagination fantasy kinds of stuff. So like, what do you mean by an ideal world? And also, in an ideal world, maybe none of this would exist. If you take more of a Buddhist, Hindu, you know, nirvana type thing, like, a lot of that philosophy is about escaping the cycle of life and rebirth and having to exist in this. Instead, you go back into just sort of, I guess, a bit like the Force in some way. You just go back into the Force and you're not part of all the suffering that life is. So ideal world, but what would you do? I guess what you're asking, like, you know, if I had no limits and so on, what would I do with my life? That one's difficult again, because another problem I have is there's been a lot of things that I've had a mild interest in. For example, when I was younger, I was very into dinosaurs and I wanted to be a paleontologist, and I learned to pronounce a lot of very strange dinosaur names. And I would try and draw them or trace them out of a book. But there's a point where I just lost interest. I'll have a goal and I'll lose interest. And that, I lost interest in that very early, I think still in primary school. And I think I also moved on to dragons, because dragons kind of cooler than dinosaurs. It's like dinosaurs that are big and scary but also have wings. You know, but my own idea of what dragons should be, rather than some of the wimpier ideas that people come up with. yeah, so there's stuff like that. Also, late primary school and early high school, I was very into robotics and artificial intelligence. But then it got to a point where, like, I wanted to do that as my career, and then I researched the crap out of it and realized that in my lifetime, I don't think we're going to achieve the type of robotics or AI that I'm interested in. I know there's a lot of hype at the moment about things like ChatGPT, but these are not the true AI that I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of like real sentience. These are just pattern machines that try and, observe patterns and then spit out a pattern that probably will fit criteria that make humans go, oh, it's so smart, but actually it's not. And, if you look at all the glitches and the ways that people have confused those chatbots, you can see they're not that intelligent after all. And, the problems that the visual ones have with fingers, for example. I mean, fingers are hard to draw for a human artist, but at least we understand that you've got this many of them and how they interact with your body. Whereas those image-based ones, they kind of look at like, okay, things look like they have fingers, but they don't realize how they're attached to the body. It's just the patterns that they've seen them appear in a two-dimensional form. Yeah, sorry, bit of a AI robotics ramble. But yeah, like I kind of realized we are not going to achieve the type of robotics that I'm into in my lifetime, and so I lost interest. And what else? Music, also something that I've been into. I actually invested a lot of time and money into learning music, especially coming from a position where it's not my natural skill. My natural skill is more maths and science. So yeah, learning to write the music and how the sounds interact and learning how to perform, how to sing and growl and all that. None of that came naturally to me. I did sing a lot when I was younger, but actually getting it to a level where you can perform it and not completely suck, that was difficult for me. So I put a lot of time and effort into it. I came out of my music degree feeling like I still didn't know how to write music, and it took me a few more years after that to really start to get the idea. And I still am not super confident, which is one of the reasons I don't have a high level of output. But yeah, so with that, my goals with that sort of self-expression and sort of building up to, I don't know, some kind of project. By the time I got up to Rainbow Death Ray, I was like, what would be really cool is if we released an EP, because I have never released music properly before. I want to do it in this band. And so we worked hard and we got there, and I burned out like crazy. But we did it. The CDs, the day we launched, the CDs had still been on the plane, and so I had to drive out with my dad to the airport, and they had literally just loaded it off the plane, and I was able to take the CDs to our launch gig in the evening. That cut it really close because, yeah, even back then there were delays. And then I had the launch gig and it went well. And then after that, I was just like, well, shit, now what? I've achieved my goal. Nothing about life has changed. It's just like, great, now what's next? And that didn't help because, yeah, by then I was not doing so well psychologically. And then you have that. It's like, I've achieved a goal. So what? I didn't have that payoff. I know other people would feel something more than I did, but I was just like, and other people might feel like, great, that was fun, I'm gonna do another one. I did not have that feeling. I was like, that was a lot of work and I didn't really I don't even know what I was expecting to get from it. It was just like a goal and I've achieved it. Yay. So, I've had a lot of these things where I'll come up with a goal and I'll either lose interest or I'll achieve it and then lose interest. So it's really hard when you ask me, what would I do? I can come up with lots of little novel ideas, but once the novelty wears off, I don't know if I'm going to give a shit about whatever it is. So it's a really hard question to answer. The psychologist and my GP will take me through this stuff, and I'm like, well, I sort of have a vague interest in this, but I don't really care about this. I'm old enough now at this point to have tried so many things and just, I've become jaded because so many of the things that I've been interested in, I've just stopped caring about. I'm in my mid-30s. I am not a kid. I don't have that youthful optimism. I don't have that I'm going off into the world kind of thing that younger people have. I'm that age where people instinctively want to settle down. I should have, like if I was a normal person, I should have found a life partner and had kids or whatever the fuck. I should be settling down if I was following like this sort of natural course. I have not done that. I have mental illness, and that's why, you know, you ask me these questions as if I'm a normal person and I can't answer them for you. If I knew what I wanted to do, I would be doing it. That's part of the reason I did music, because I thought I wanted to do it, and then I did it, and then I'm like, well, I mean, you know, and I think I get a bit out of performance, because performance is the right type of adrenaline, and the right type of adrenaline is one of the only things that can break through the anhedonia. But it's risky to try and chase that type of adrenaline, because, you know, like the wrong kinds of adrenaline lead to anxiety and stress, which is not fun. And then some types of adrenaline can lead you into dangerous situations. And so it's really hard to get that balance right. And then the amount of work for me to go and do a performance now, I get tired, and, you know, it's only a temporary bit of adrenaline that makes me feel a little bit better for a short period of time. It's hard to weigh up like the cost benefit of doing that. Yeah, so, you know, I don't know what I want to do, especially having gone through all that. Like, I have the vague sort of, yeah, it'd be nice to get back on stage, but I don't care that much. So yeah, I think I've made my points really hard for me to come up with something that I genuinely want to do. I can come up with vague goals, like that would be nice, but I don't have that emotional part of me to say, yes, I definitely care about it. If I did, I would be pursuing it. I probably wouldn't be depressed. I'd have a sense of purpose. I don't know how many of you follow Jordan Peterson, but he has that, I forget what it was called, the life planning kind of thing. Scribe Chronicler will maybe be able to put it in the comments for me, or I'll think of it later. But it's like about goal setting. It's this course that I think like life authoring or something like that, and you write down your goals and stuff. And I got access to that a long time ago and started looking at it and just never went anywhere with it. Yeah, like I get it. It's an important thing for a lot of people, but it's just not something I've been able to do. And I know it's something that could help, and I've tried to do it, tried to think about it, and I just hit these dead ends. Yeah, if I knew what I wanted to do, I would be doing it because I'm aware enough of the strategy. But I'm also aware enough of my own flip-floppiness. Also, when I was really, really young, like preschool level, when adults asked me what I wanted to do with my life, I listed like 20 different occupations, and they're standing there going, yeah, okay. Whereas like other kids would be like, I want to be a nurse. You know, I never had that experience. I wanted to try a whole bunch of different things. And the only way I'd be able to pull that off is if I was literally a Time Lord with a gazillion lives flying around in a fucking TARDIS. Sorry, I spent a lot of time talking about that one. I do keep thinking like there was another thought, but it's escaped me as usual. And then how would you feel? Obviously, if I was doing what I wanted in life, I wouldn't feel depressed, would I? Like, I don't understand what that question is. Like, does anyone want to feel depressed? No. Anyone who knows what depression is like doesn't want to feel like that. People want to be happy. People want to be fulfilled. People want a sense of purpose. I think that's obvious. Like, I don't understand what that question is. How would it look if you had reached all your goals? Happy, fulfilled life. And then, okay, so then the second part, you talk a lot about the past and about problems. Is that a problem? And you know what I've been going through a lot, like especially the people who started watching me from the schizoid stuff onwards would think, oh, she talks about mental illness a lot. It is a big part of my life, and my YouTube journey kind of started with me doing vlogs about my mental health. So that's kind of what I've done a lot, but I have branched out into different things. Like I've made videos about, you know, with my music, I've made the Punk Rave Australia ones, but where I am in my life right now, like finally getting the schizoid thing recognized last year, that's kind of a big deal for me, because it also led to realizing that I have the glass child trauma, and realizing that maybe dissociation is a thing I need to look at. Like, this is new, relatively new stuff for me. So of course I'm thinking about it, and of course I'm thinking, how did I get here? Because I need to look at my past to understand my present and to figure out what I need to do with my life to get through it. I don't see that as a problem, and it's just where I am right now. The other thing is, like, what would you prefer if I was thinking about the future? Like, you know, a lot of people these days think about climate change and, oh, what about future generations and the future of species, the future of our planet and whatever. And that's still a problem that they're thinking about. They're not any happier than me thinking about that kind of stuff. Some kids these days seem to be quite stressed, thinking they're going to die because of climate change. But if they're in one of these wealthier countries, not so much a concern. It's more a concern if you're in a poorer country that's closer to sea level, or if you're one of these idiots who bought a mansion on the coast where we've known about erosion for decades, like it's super obvious. I remember as a kid going to the beach and seeing, you know, those houses along the beachfront and they're having to build walls. Like, that's nothing new. That's been around for ages. Back when we were calling it global warming instead of climate change, it's been around forever. Don't build a mansion where coastal erosion is obviously going to happen. But yeah, no, like, the past, like, because I was so in denial of the impact of my past, of course I'm looking at it now and analyzing it and going, holy shit, look at all this stuff I didn't know. Whereas, you know, before I had that realization about the trauma, I was more just like, I don't understand why I'm different. You know, sort of just floating. Like, I have to look at my past to think about my problems and figure out where to go from here. That's like, I don't understand that issue either. And like, you know, with thinking about the future, I can give you ideas about where I want to be in the future, but again, a lot of it won't be realistic, and a lot of it I will change my mind on. So if I tell you about the future, like, oh, is that really that important? Like, you know, it sort of makes me think of some of these guys who are like, oh, here's something that Disney might do next. And I'm like, okay, but maybe you should wait and see what they're actually going to do. Or here's what a government might do next. Okay, but they haven't done it yet. Why don't we just wait? Like right now in Australia, we've got the budget coming up. I'm pretty sure it hasn't happened yet. I think it's next week maybe. And the budget every year is when they sort of lay out the major things that they're going to spend money on for the next year or the next few years, really, like what they're going to use this year's money on. And there's so much speculation in the media. There's a few things that are being drip fed and it's leading to all this speculation. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And, you know, some people are using speculation to try and lobby for things like increasing welfare and, you know, calling for higher wages in certain industries and whatever. And I get that. I mean, these people have been advocating for that regardless of whether anything was being drip fed. But, you know, until they actually do the announcements, some people are like, oh, they might do this, they might do that, they might do... Who cares? Wait for them to just say what they're going to do. It's also like, you know, with on people on trial, you know, they speculate about, oh, so-and-so's on trial, like maybe they'll be guilty, or what if this came out? And it's like, why don't you just wait for the trial to finish and then you'll have an answer and it will have gone through the proper legal processes instead of you speculating on what someone is like. Like, there's a reason for the legal processes. There's a reason you go through that instead of trial by mob or trial by media. So, you know, like the future, thinking about the future too much, like the future hasn't come yet. And, you know, if you speculate so much now, a lot of it's going to be wrong anyway. It just feels like kind of a pointless exercise unless it's informing something specific that you're doing now. For example, like lobbying stuff, I guess I'm a bit more open to that. But if it's just like wondering what's going to happen, or like, you know, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do that, it doesn't really help me right now. And then there's things like, so one goal I guess that I do have would be to get back into music. That's more for like mental health stuff. This is not ideal world stuff. I mean, ideal world, I'd already be in a band with decent people who are competent, who pull their own weight, and we'd be gigging enough for me to get that adrenaline hit every now and then. That would be pretty good, but this is not the ideal world. What the reality is I reach out to musicians, occasionally, if their music style matches, occasionally we'll start trying to do something and then they flake on me. Keeps happening. Or there'll be some kind of disagreement. Like I had this one guy I started working with, and the first song was going well, but then his music style, the stuff that he was sending me, was getting weirder and weirder and getting further and further from what I liked. And then he turned out to be one of these anti-vax COVID conspiracy people who thinks that, as if the government's trying to kill us with vaccines. And I'm like, I've had plenty, I'm still here. A lot of us have not died from vaccines and nothing has really changed. Anyway, yeah, I tried to ignore it, but there was a point where I posted something that was relatively neutral and he went on this rant about whatever he wanted to believe I'd said, and I was just like, I can't work with someone that, like, I'm crazy, but that's just a different kind of crazy. And so the music was going the wrong way, and then it turns out his personality and his paranoia was going the wrong way. It suddenly made sense. All his working song titles, they were all about paranoid shit. But anyway, yeah, there'll be a falling out like that. And so I keep trying to reach out to people to do music, and there's just so many reasons that they don't go ahead. I don't want to overwork myself like I did with Rainbow Death Ray. That's what happened when I started my own band. I ended up doing too much of the work. I don't want to get stuck working with some whack job who, I can't even. And then also there's people who want to work with me and seem competent, but they're doing grindcore, for example, and I'm not interested in grindcore. Then there's people who want to work with me, but they want to do pop punk, and I don't want to do pop punk. They're like, oh yeah, we like your vocals, but we don't want you to growl. And I'm like, fuck you! I didn't learn to growl to just not use it. So, there's people who don't understand what I'm getting at. And then there's people who won't even let me audition because I'm a chick. So, what can you do? That the whole band thing is not in my control. Now, in terms of solo performance, yeah, it would be nice, but I don't want it enough to actually do the work. Like, I have what I need to be able to get there, although I don't really have my music space at the moment. But in general, I have what I need to be able to come up with the music and organize to do gigs and stuff, but I'm not motivated enough to do it. Like, yeah, I get a little bit of an adrenaline hit, but kind of don't care. So part of the band is hacking my psychology, because then I feel like I have to do things. There's an external deadline, external reasons to be doing stuff. And also mental health reasons, because it gets me out of the house, gets me exercising, gets me having to socialize with people and finding a reason to socialize that doesn't annoy me. Anyway, so what was I talking about? The past and about problems. I think I went on a bit of a tangent there. But yeah, no, so I can say I want to be in a band. I've been wanting to be in a band. Even while the Rainbow Death Ray was still going, I was already looking for another band because I knew it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. It was fine, but it was that really bubbly kind of vibe, and yeah, it wasn't the music that I set out to make. It kind of happened by accident in a lot of ways. And then a lot of the songs were sort of older stuff that I'd written over the years. Maybe I think the oldest song was probably 5 years old and had been through a bunch of reworkings until it became the Rainbow Death Ray, the final version. And so I was wanting to get into more complicated songs. Rainbow Death Ray's songs were quite simple. We had to, my boyfriend at the time had to fill in on guitar for us one time. And he, until then, didn't realize that it was literally just power chords. There's nothing complicated going on in there. Anyway, I it's not the type of metal I wanted to be in, and it wasn't aggressive enough for me. And then people were thinking we were some kind of LGBT activist group, which is not why the word rainbow was in there. It's just because didn't occur to me that people would think we were that. There was someone who thought we were lesbian death metal, which is hilarious because we weren't lesbians and we weren't death metal, but whatever. It was just all around not what I wanted to really be doing. So since like already I was looking for new bands, and that was in probably 2015. It's now 2023. I did the collab, the AD Destroyer thing, but that wasn't really a band. We never actually performed. I've done some of my own stuff. I've done some collabs, but I have not found a band. And that's been, what, 8 years of looking. I have been trying, and it's just not in my control. So as much as I can say this is a goal, it's not up to me whether that happens. I'm doing as much as I can, and if the world doesn't cooperate, I'm not gonna get there. That's just kind of how it is. You know, like I could start a band myself again, but then I'm gonna burn out, so I don't have any interest in that. Yeah, so I can talk about the future. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean there's even much I can do to try to get there. And you know, so the next part, how do you imagine having resolved all that? If I knew how to resolve shit, I would have done it already. Or if it was in my power, I would have done it already. For example, one way to resolve some of the shit in my life would be to win the lottery. So I'm buying lottery tickets when it's over a certain amount that I could, you know, buy myself a house, so I can get away from the noise at home, buy myself a house, and then have enough to like invest and live off the dividends or interest or whatever, and support myself that way, and just sort of be self-sufficient, and maybe pay for someone to bring me food, because food is a little bit tricky. Yeah, anyway, but as much as I can tell you how I would resolve it, until I win the lottery, if that's like, you know what, the only times I've won anything from the lottery is like a few cents here and there, because I got like 2 numbers, or I don't know what the cutoff is. Like, you know, I've won like maybe $10 in the past, for example. That's not going to fix my life. I mean like the, you know, 10 million, whatever. Yeah, so I can tell you that's how I would resolve it, but it doesn't make it any more realistic. It doesn't give me any pathway to get there either, other than to keep buying lottery tickets. And I think my grandpa used to say it's the hope of the hopeless. Well, I'm the hopeless, so there you go. Again, what would you feel like? We've already covered that. How would life be? Life wouldn't suck. Duh! Isn't that what everyone wants? Life to just not suck, to feel meaningful. So yeah, like this whole thing about focusing on the future and goal setting, like if I focus on the future too much, it'll probably just make me more depressed because I can't get there. In the same way, like, you know, thinking about an ideal world, there's a lot of stuff that is just never going to happen in reality, and that I can't influence. I can't influence, for example, the war in Ukraine. I'm just a random on the other side of the planet with no resources and no influence. Like, so, you know, what's the point of thinking about that? If it resolves, great. If it doesn't, well, life just continues being the same disrupted thing that it is. Yeah, so like in some ways, this whole thinking about the future and what you want to do, it's not always helpful. Like, I know it helps some people with psychology because it helps them get back on track with their lives, and then you break down your big goal into little goals and small steps, but they have to be realistic, achievable goals. And I currently don't know that I have any. But so this sort of brings me back to, I said I was going to address Solar Scribe Chronicler. What do I hope to do in the near term? Realistic things, not talking about, you know, this future ideal world that doesn't exist. Realistically, what I'm doing is I'm just doing the same things that I'm doing in terms of like going to my psychologist, for the moment seeing my psychiatrist, seeing my GP. The first thing I need to do is get through this whole DSP process, because I think that will stabilize my life. I talked about that in a previous vlog. Yeah, then the Centrelink, the government welfare service in Australia, won't harass me every 3 months and fuck things up for me every 3 months. And so maybe I'll be able to reach more stability without them throwing me off course every 3 months and setting back my progress in terms of trying to figure out my life. So that's the near-term goal, is get through the DSP process. It's going to take at least 3 months. Like, I've got to get the paperwork together, and then they take 3 months to process. So probably like 4 months, 5 months, depends how quickly things happen, whether there's any delays, whether I need to appeal. Yeah, that's the sort of immediate kind of issue. And then, you know, I talked about in my last Super Meat Boy live stream about, you know, going out with a friend, and she's studying psychology. So we've at the time you watch this, I'll probably have already been on this outing. But yeah, we're going to a gig, and it's like, you know, also the whole day is structured in a way to try and make it not suck for me and give me reasons to be out of the house. And, you know, if I can maybe try and do something like that once a month, maybe gradually getting me more out of the house, a little bit more in society in some kind of a way, yeah, because I do kind of need to break out of like the habit that I've got at the moment, which is just staying at home, keeping to myself, you know, very withdrawn. So yeah, working on that kind of a thing. Those kinds of small strategies in terms of, you know, like, this is not ideal world. This is dealing with my realistic situation and my realistic abilities. Like, what I can actually do is I can try and go out to more gigs, get myself out in the metal scene again, things like that. Then, you know, if the DSP thing goes through, I might look at NDIS. Originally, like, my psychologist last year suggested maybe I'd be able to fund more therapy sessions from that, which is a bit more relevant now that they cut my therapy sessions. Like, it would be nice if the budget shows that they're going to bring back that, but I'm not holding my breath. So, you know, I might see if the NDIS can help with that. I think I've got to frame it in a particular way, though, to do with my life functioning or something. Otherwise, they don't care. Also, like with NDIS, whether there are other ways that they can help me, you know, get out of the house more and do, I don't know. That's like a further step away. Like, it's too far. I have to get through the DSP first. I can't deal with so many things at once. So I'm sort of dealing with, like, what is the most immediate thing that I need to get through. Never mind the next steps, because I might not get there. There's no point worrying about NDIS shit. So the NDIS is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's a little bit different to the Disability Support Pension. That's just money. The NDIS is more about, like, carers and funding therapy and shit like that. But for me, there's, like, you know, it's too much to think about. If I think about that, I'm just gonna get stressed. That's why bother thinking about that future that I'm not ready to deal with? I'm working on what I need to do most, like, urgently, like, what's the impending things that I have to deal with. Never mind the future, because I don't know, anything could happen. You know, China could invade Taiwan and the world could go to shit. Then who cares about NDIS? We're probably gonna have bigger problems than that. Like, anything could happen. Why make these lofty plans? You know, like, if it's not something that I definitely know I want, there's no point. It doesn't make sense. Now, for some people, if they really, really like something, for example, an autistic person who really likes their trains, and I know they fixed Zigzag Railway, for example. Maybe they wanted to help volunteer and help fix Zigzag Railway, and one day that would get working and it's realistic. They go and volunteer. Now Zigzag Railway is working, and now they can spend the rest of their time volunteering on the train. Whatever, like, you know, there are some people who have really strong interests. I use autistic as an example because that's one of the things. They have really strong interests, and so if they have some kind of goal, they're going to stay interested in that thing long enough to, you know, stand a chance at getting there. Or like just your regular person who has a passion maybe for sport, and so they get involved in sport, they become a coach or they become a manager or whatever. Good for you. I don't have anything that I feel that strongly about. I will say that I like music, but if I really did, I would be more self-motivated to chase it. Instead, I'm like, I guess I'll do a bit. The other thing is I still have too many interests. Like I said, when I was a kid, 20 different things on my list. Same thing like when we were choosing subjects at school. So first of all, in year 8, choosing subjects for year 9 and 10. Got even worse choosing subjects for year 11 and 12. Apparently all the other kids were struggling to find enough subjects that they wanted to do to fill their whole timetable. Whereas I had like this huge list of things that I was kind of interested in and had a super amount of trouble trying to cut things down. So like, you know, things I didn't get to do in school because I had too many on my list was like art and music maybe ancient history. Like these are things that I couldn't do because you can't choose that many subjects. And so like our world is not set up for people like me who want to do everything to a small degree. You know, I can't just focus on one thing, and just like to get really good at something, you have to really dedicate yourself to that. I'm not like that. So like music, bonsai, and like I could make a career out of bonsai if I wanted to. My boss would take me on, you know, because it's so hard to find someone with my skill set and personality. Like there are people who like bonsai, but they want to do things their way, whereas I can do the things that he needs to do. I can do it in a way that fits the business. So I could get more bonsai shifts if I was capable and if I was interested. I'm not interested. I'm not like one of these ones who goes off to Japan and does an internship or whatever working for one of the bonsai masters. I don't give a crap. I don't want to get accredited. I'm just, you know, what I was doing was fine, and I need to work back to getting that. Like that's another goal, like medium term, is getting myself back into, maybe try and get back up to the 1 full day of work. I'd start with a half day, full day, work up to the full day, but that's probably about as much as I'm going to be able to do. But that, I have to get my life stable first before I can think about work properly. Anyway, so like in terms of interest, music, bonsai, visual arts, doing YouTube. The YouTube's the only thing I'm managing to do at the moment. Yeah, maybe working with animals could be, you know, like, okay, let's just stop there at the 5. Okay. How would you fit all that into a life? Like, it's not, how would you do it? That's why I've looked at stuff like acting, for example, because, you know, actors have to play a whole bunch of different roles. And so in theory, you could do all those different things. Like, you've got to learn a little bit about everything so you can convincingly act it. But I know I'm no good at acting, and I also don't like acting. And then also with my body type and everything, I would only get certain roles anyway, so I wouldn't be able to do all that stuff even in an acting kind of context. And it's just like, how do I fit everything that I want to do into my life? And then how would I choose one thing over another when I only have a small amount of real interest in them? Like there's this cartoon, it might have been XKCD or something similar, maybe Cyanide and Happiness, where someone's like, oh, I love science. And then the other person's like, do you? Like, would you do all the research, sit through all the research papers, sift through all the data and all this kind of stuff? You don't love science. You're just looking at science at science's butt as science walks by. Like, this is the popular science thing. That's kind of how I feel about science. I like some certain aspects of science, but I don't like the idea of sitting down, reading reports, doing endless experiments. A bunch of the experiments failed. You have to repeat experiments. You have to write them in this scientific detail. I'm not into that. Same with like psychology. I studied psychology for a semester, and then realized this is not for me. I don't want to have to do all this like peer-reviewed crap, going through journal entries, doing a bunch of statistics. I don't give a shit about that. I'm interested in more the end results. Like, same with robotics. I did go and do a few weeks of a mechatronic engineering course and realized I don't care about systems. I don't care about having to sit down and program the damn things. I'm not interested enough to get far in any of these things. YouTube and music are probably the ones I've gotten the furthest with. Or I guess bonsai, because I did get a job, but that was kind of just a stroke of luck. Art, very slowly, because I don't like the art world. I know I have an art degree, but I don't like the art world. You have to schmooze up to people and stand around pretending to care about drinking wine and eating cheese and looking at people's stuff, which doesn't take that long. You only need a few minutes to like really look at something and have a thought about it. It's not like music where you actually have to listen for 3 minutes or however long a song is. Yeah, I don't like the art world. So I don't mind making art, but then what do I do with it? Just sits in the corner of a cupboard. I've sold a couple of things, but most of my stuff just sits in a cupboard. I can't be bothered to do exhibitions. It costs money to do exhibitions, whereas if I do a gig, people are more likely to pay me, or maybe at least give me food or drink or something. Like, I don't have to pay them to play. Especially because I don't go for those kinds of gigs. I think they're exploitative and I avoid them and avoid encouraging them. Yeah, and then pets and stuff. Like, I like my pet. I don't necessarily like everyone else's pet. People send me pet photos to cheer me up sometimes, and I'm like, I don't give a shit about your cat or dog. I give a shit about my dog. Yeah. So this is probably not what you wanted me to say, but I just think this is not the right question for me. It's not a helpful question for me. And that's why, thinking when you think about the past so much, that's because of where I'm at. And it is actually relevant to my condition, because it turns out glass child trauma, I never would have figured that out if I didn't sit down and think about it. And I never, that sort of helps me think, gee, it would be nice if I could move out, if I could win the lottery and buy myself a house, but this is unrealistic future stuff. There's no point thinking about it. All I can do is buy my lottery ticket, every time it hits a certain amount. That's all I can do in that sense. I'm not going to ever make enough money to do something like that because of how screwed up I am. And as I said, I'm in my mid-30s. This is a clear pattern in my life. I've had a lot of time to think about stuff, a lot of time to try things. I've done so many degrees. So I started off in the combined science and arts degree, doing psychology, Japanese, religion, maths, and then whatever else I was going to do then. The next year I had my first go at an art course. The next year I did music. I actually got through music. When I finished that, I did the mechatronic engineering and medical science thing for a few weeks. Then I went back to music, did audio engineering for half the course maybe. I had an internship. I did a live sound internship, and I also did a studio-based internship where they did a lot of heavy metal hardcore type stuff. And that was enough for me to realize that being in a studio, being an audio engineer was not for me. I did that. I did a graphic design course and got most of the way through, but then they wanted me to do 50 coffee logos. And not only do I hate coffee, it was just repetitive. And I realized being a graphic designer is about other people. You're doing things for other people, whereas it's not like art where it's your own art, your own expression. So that wasn't for me. And then what did I do after that? Then I went back and did my art degree. And I think that's about the time that I thought, I'm done with education, I think. I've tried a lot of things that I thought I would be interested in, from art through to the mechatronic engineering and medical science, cyborgs and shit. That was kind of the motivation there. What else do you want from me? I've tried so many things. I've figured out I'm not interested. Paleontology. I used to look at a lot of ancient Egyptian stuff, archaeology. I'm not so interested in business stuff, but when I was little, my mum worked in finance. Occasionally I'd go in and help fold papers, and I looked at stuff. I did data entry. I've done the retail jobs, both like McDonald's and also print, photo lab kinds of stuff, printing things. I also worked as a sample coordinator, working with fabric, sending fabric samples out, and I started to get really good at recognizing fabrics, which was a bit scary for a bit. And then what I also did is more of a office, work from home job. I did that until my brain started melting out my ears, and I realized I was dissociating and just going in full robot mode. And yeah, I was spiraling pretty hard then. I've tried so many different types of jobs. The only ones that I haven't tried are the ones that you need super dedication to, 7-year degrees, medicine or becoming a vet. And then, a lot of my family members, extended family, some of them are lawyers, and so I've seen bits and pieces of that. And I think some of my thinking is a bit lawyer-like sometimes. And I'm just I couldn't do that either. So what else? What other kinds of goals are there? I don't even know. I've tried so many things. And when you've gone maybe this will be the thing, and I'd get depressed, but then I'd think of a new goal and that would help me for a bit, but then I would get disappointed with it and crash. Disappointment, crash, losing a dream is so much worse than just not having a dream to begin with. And I think my brain sort of started to get that idea, and it's my brain just doesn't care anymore. Why bother having these dreams, having these goals, because I don't know if I'm going to stay interested in a thing. I do still my brain does fixate on things now and then and sort of get a little bit interested, but it takes me a shorter amount of time to lose interest nowadays. So, for example, I found a dog training YouTuber, and for a while I thought, I wonder if I could train dogs, but then I looked into what it would actually take, and I was like, nah, I'm just curious. It's not something that I actually want to do. There's always things like that I'm looking at. And considering, is this something that I would want to do, that I might be able to work at. And it just keeps coming back the same. I'm not that interested. I'm not able to sustain an interest. That's just the thing about my mental health, where I'm at, where my brain is at, how my brain works. It's not a relevant question for me. It's not a helpful question for me. And that's why I don't like this question, because it assumes that what works for other people works for me. I mean, I don't know if you asked this question to try and help me or if it was just a curiosity thing, but most people ask this question thinking it might help me because they think that I'm like everyone else and that the same things are going to work for me that work for other people. It doesn't work for me like that. And I think I've heard a lot of schizoids have trouble, finding a path, sticking to something, and a lot of schizoids will just start something and then quit it. And it might be that anhedonia thing where you just can't get what other people get from it. People enjoy stuff and we kind of can't hold on to that feeling so well. So yeah, and then in my case, my brain has a mild amount of interest for a lot of things. And also I have the skill level to do a lot of things. I'm a little bit good at a lot of stuff. And that makes it also hard, because if I was only good at one thing, it would make sense to just go and do that one thing and learn to do it really well. But I'm a little bit of good at a lot of stuff. And so it's like there's no clear path, even in terms of skill set. So in terms of what I want and in terms of what I'm good at, I have too much choice. And if you've seen me setting up my Stardew Valley character and all that, too much choice is difficult for me because I don't know what I want. If I knew what I want, I would do it and I wouldn't and ah so much. I would have more certainty and just be able to go for it. And I don't know. It's really hard to prioritize. Like, in terms of the tasks I have now, doing music, art, YouTube, also my poetry book, haven't got around to that. Also making more of my own t-shirts, have sort of started the process, haven't finished that. Like there's a lot of things that I've started and I just haven't had the motivation to actually finish. What more can I say? I hope that's covered that question pretty thoroughly and maybe people won't ask that so much again. Anyway, catch you in the next one.